Accountant at Echlinville, huh?
Well done.
All right, guys. Yeah. Good evening, Luke. Good to see you again, mate. Guys, welcome and thank you very much for joining us. I know we're all missing Germany and Spain tonight, so thank you very much for choosing Dunville over that. And yeah, so my name's Jarlath Watson. I have a few jobs at Echlinville, including the FD, including the finance director. We're a small company, so we tend to do a lot of multitasking. And Stephen Magennis, my colleague here, joined us about 3 or 4 years ago as a sales director. So, and yes, we are. You're tasting tonight Dunville's Irish whiskey. We are Echlinville Distillery. We are a distillery in County Down in the north of Ireland, about 25 miles south of Belfast. And we have been, as well as distilling our own single malt and single pot still, we have been producing the Dunville's brand since 2012. I guess Dunville's, we tend to specialize in sherry finishes, and we tend to specialize in age statement single malts with big sherry finishes. So depending on the age of the whiskey, that could be from 2.5 to 3 year sherry finish up to 7, 8, 9 year sherry finishes for some of the older 20, the stuff that's coming 22 now. And we put particular emphasis on the type of sherry craft. So we use Oloroso, Palo, Cortado, PX, etc. And we tend to focus on those old world crafts, so predominantly sherries, but also ports and rums. And I think tonight you're tasting 4 sherry finished whiskies, as well as the 1808 blend.
Marvelous. So I know some of
anything to add before we.
Sorry, Jonathan. I know some of the people on like to get their kind of their whiskey sometimes poured at the start. So we were talking just before we came on. The order you want to go in is 3 Crowns, the 1808, the 10-year-old, the 21, and then the 20-year-old in that order. Am I correct?
Yeah. Yeah. So the first one we're going to try is 3 Crowns Sherry. I think for us that it would be criminal not to start off a Dunville tasting without a sherry cask. Dunville. So yeah, 3 Crowns Dunvilles is the first one that we're going to try. This, I know personally for myself and Jarlath, this is probably, I think, bang for buck, the best whiskey that we think we have in the portfolio. We have some incredible single casks and some incredible high age statement whiskies, but this one is probably the one that we take the most pride in, and it's something that I know I don't want to preach to everyone how blended whiskey is, but for us, 3 Crowns is a blended whiskey, but we don't have really good Oloroso 7, 8 year old in cask, and then we blend it with 7 or 8 year old grain, and we use a small component of sherry cask single malt and blend it with grain that's in 2nd or 3rd fill, grain in 2nd and 3rd fill bourbon barrels. For us, across everything, we only use first fill casks. So all of our grain goes into first fill casks, and all of our malt will go into first fill bourbon casks and first fill sherry casks. So with this one, it's made a tiny bit different. So we actually blend the malt and grain together once they come out of first fill bourbon barrels at roughly, say, 5 years old, and then we transferred into Oloroso sherry casks for a further 18 months to 2 years. So with this one is that we're deliberately making a fully finished blend. So we want something that, and Jarlath will go into more detail on probably how we come around with this, but for us, we wanted something that is just isn't a sherry component added into the blend. We wanted the grain also to go into sherry, which a lot of the guys are kind of picking up straight away with the spice and the Christmas fruit, or the Christmas cake, and just very lively in the nose. And that's what we wanted. If you want to chip in there, Jarlath.
Yeah, I think that liveliness. I mean, obviously it's between 65 and 70% grain whiskey, 30 to 35 malt. We mature the grain and malt separately for 5 years in first fill bourbon. Then we marry that grain and malt. We put it into a first fill Oloroso sherry hogshead. So not a butt. We only use smaller hogsheads. So a butt's 500 liters. We use smaller 225 liter casks. So more interaction, more influence. We did used to do it the other way. We used to just blend the sherry components into the grain. We first brought out 3 Crowns about 9 years ago. After about 2 years, we knew it wasn't working. I like a whiskey that speaks as one, a whiskey that is coherent, that's one single unit. The old 3 Crowns, you could pull out the individual elements. It wasn't one coherent whiskey. So about 5 years ago, we changed how we made it, and we blended the malt and grain and then put it into fresh Oloroso. And what that gives you, that 18 months of that marrying the malt and grain and both maturing together in that Oloroso cask, gives you one coherent whiskey. You're not pulling out the malt and grain elements or the sherry and bourbon elements. It just gives you one coherent whiskey that's really balanced. For us, I always joke and say it's a breakfast whiskey. We always start off our tastings and say this is our breakfast whiskey. But in a way, I guess what you mean by that is, I mean, it's a lighter whiskey for our style of whiskey, and it's balanced with the age, with that grain element on the sherry finish, you know. So it's a 7-year-old whiskey. It's bottled at 43%. So a medium ABV. It's an 18-month sherry finish. Once we get into our 20-year-olds, we're looking at higher ABVs, sometimes cask strength, and maybe 6-7 years in sherry and single malt. So everything's in balance, but this one still has a balance, but everything's kept quite easy. You know, it's not too high in ABV. There's a lightness there from the grain, but a lovely creamy sherry finish. The malt comes through, and it just drinks as one coherent whiskey that has balance. It has balance from the nose through to the palate, through to the finish. There's a connection with all 3. They all tell the same story, and there's a progression. The finish, the ABV, and the age all work in unison. They're all at the right balance, you know. So it's all about getting that balance. So it's not a big, massive sherry finish where that will just overpower the whiskey. So everything's kept quite light and easy. For me, the one thing I love about this whiskey is that 18 months in the sherry, but brings a lovely creaminess and a lovely mouthfeel to the whiskey that you don't often find in a 7-year-old blend. And I think that is just putting the whole whiskey, the malt and grain, into that sherry cask for 2 years, only using first fill casks, only using them once, using the smaller cask. And Dunville's, in Ireland, we've got a reputation for very, very high-end old world cask finishes. We only buy the best casks out there. You know, we're the secret of Dunville's is the cask that we don't buy. You know, we work with.
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Sorry, you kind of you froze there for a second, Jarlath. But
Oh yeah, so I mean, so they know the quality of cask we look for, and they know that 80% of the casks out there are not Dunville's cask. But when those 20% come in, they contact us, and that will come through in the whiskeys you'll try tonight. Yeah. But yeah, this first one, it's just a lovely, light, creamy, everyday, any time of the day whiskey that, you know, you just want to have on your back shelf because you can go to it any time.
Yeah, I think even Martin, Chris and Craig, they're kind of like, everyone's kind of hinting at this kind of sweetness and that milk chocolate, that kind of melted chocolate, that ice cream, that vanilla ice cream. No, like all of those things there.
Yeah. No, it's 100%. Yeah, I was literally just going to say what you said there, Steve. It's great taste notes coming in there. Really lively on the nose, says Craig. Dark fruit, cherry chocolate, as you mentioned there. Interesting nose. Fruit melted, milk chocolate, vanilla ice cream in a cone. I'm getting a slight licorice aftertaste on that one. Nice. Can imagine that what the wife would say if I poured up my cornflakes, but Kevin thinks it would go well over porridge. So it's great feedback so far.
Yeah, so putting whiskey on your porridge is a thing in Belfast. There's a couple of hotels that actually have the bottle of whiskey beside the porridge in the breakfast buffet. So that is a thing over here. I guess for me, the predominant note for me, we love putting sugars into whiskeys. We love what sugars do in whiskeys. Not just the sweetness, but the viscosity, the body, the mouthfeel. And a lot of the whiskeys you'll try later on have lots of dark brown sugars. To me, this one is more of a butterscotch caramel. Yeah. You know, like, so if you're making caramel in a pot and you mix brown sugar and butter, and that makes caramel, Then if you put in a cream and you get this very light, almost butterscotch caramel, this is what it's that note that for me is that overwhelming note in this whiskey.
Yeah.
And again, just that caramelness that you get from sherry cask, but again, just lighter, maybe cream down.
Yeah, even Martin was saying there, just would we recommend putting a drop of water into it? For me, this whiskey is, I think it's perfect at 43.5%. For me, I'm a big advocate for a tiny bit of water in whiskey. I enjoy a bit of water in whiskey. With this one, I just think you kind of, not that you lose that kind of butterscotch creaminess that Jarlath was talking about, but it kind of loses that kind of viscosity on the palate that kind of really goes well with. And definitely for all the guys and girls in the tasting, try a tiny bit of water with it. But for me, I think you just lose, especially with this whiskey, you lose the viscosity. But when we go to the next whiskey, I highly recommend you to add just a tinchy bit of water to it, but try it without water first, then you'll really see. Because the next whiskey that we'll try is something. It's probably the hardest product we've ever had to make. So yeah, I would try it with water, but for me, it kind of does lose that texture, that viscosity.
Yeah, I mean, we work very hard in Dunville's. We're a big believer that the mouthfeel is really, really, really important in whiskey. It's very, very underrated. Whenever you get to the last 2 or 3 whiskeys, you'll really notice that. We firmly believe that whiskey is a luxury experience, and drinking a whiskey should be a luxury experience. We're not into, making a whiskey you sit there and have 8 of them a night and get, we're into a whiskey that you pour 1 or 2 a night and analyze and enjoy and let sit for half an hour in a glass and see how it changes, etc., etc. And the mouthfeel is a really important part of that, just how luxurious it feels in the mouth. You'll notice that hopefully in the last 2 or 3 whiskies big time, and it's getting those lots of sugars out of those fresh sherry casks that work with the oils in the whiskey, and those sugars work in the same way to add viscosity, and then they cling to the side of your mouth and add flavour. But that viscosity and mouthfeel is so important. I think adding water, you sometimes can lose a bit of that, and possibly in this one you might, but give it a go.
Yeah, well, I tried a bit of water just because we were talking about it, and you're dead right what you were saying, Stephen, that it does lose that kind of that viscosity there, and that mouthfeel drops off. No, it's a really interesting whiskey, and we have it on the site for 50 quid. I've got 2 questions for both of you. One is there's a peated version of this that we have on the whiskyshop.com that's not in the lineup tonight, but I've set it up so that your discount code will work on that one if you wanted to try the peated one after this tasting, folks. So could you tell us a bit about the peated 3 Crowns, and also for the name 3 Crowns itself and the brand Dunville? You mentioned at the start, Jarlath, that Echlinville Distillery has been going since 2013, but let's say hypothetically that there's a few people on the chat who this is their first kind of encounter with the brand. The brand Dunville itself goes back slightly further than that as well.
Well, okay. Well, sure. I'll tell you what, I'll give you 2 minutes on Echlinville first. So Echlinville Distillery started in 2013. So our first liquid is 9 years old, malt and pot still. What you're tasting tonight, there's some of our liquid in some of these whiskies, but some of these whiskies are sourced whiskies as well. With Echlinville, we make single malt and single pot still Irish whiskey. I guess what sets Echlinville apart is we're a farm distillery. We're a field to glass farm distillery. So everything is done at Echlinville. So from ploughing the field and sowing the barley through to putting the cork in the bottle and wrapping the pallet is done at Echlinville. That includes growing our own barley, harvesting our own barley, malting our own barley, floor malting our own barley. Nobody else in Ireland malts their own barley, and very few anywhere floor malt anymore because it's an absolute bitch. There's probably ourselves, Springbank, and a few others. We're probably trying to make whiskey the Springbank way in Ireland, but it's the expensive way. So it is from growing and floor malting your own barley through to distillation, maturation on site, bottling on site. It's all done at Echlinville, so we have control of every stage of the process, and we're big into provenance and telling a story of where the whiskey comes from, telling a story. I guess terroir is an interesting subject in Irish whiskey at the minute with Waterford, and Waterford are trying to tell the story of how 50 different farms taste. We're trying to tell the story of how one 50-acre farm will taste year in, year out. You know, barley grown on our 50-acre farm. And that's what Echlinville is, a true farm to glass, every stage of the process controlled by us, making whiskey without compromise, from growing your barley to dunnage warehousing. Everything's done the old-fashioned way, the expensive way, but the right way. Dunville's is an old Belfast brand. Dunville started in 1808, hence the name of the next whiskey. By the 1880s, when Alfred Bernard was touring UK and Ireland with writing his book, Dunville's was the largest distillery in the world. Alfred Bernard comments in his book that Dunville's have the largest stores of whiskey of anybody in Scotland or Ireland, which pretty much means the biggest distillery. A lot of the other distilleries got into bother and closed down in the early 20th century. Dunville's continued to exist profitably, and until 1936, when it fell silent. The distillery fell silent not because of the usual reasons of the Prohibition or the Irish War of Independence and trade wars or the coffee still or anything else. It fell silent because, unbelievably today, it shows how things have changed in business. In 1936, there was three sons born. The first one died at childhood, the second one died of injuries. He received a VC Cross in World War I, died of injuries received from that about 8 years later. The third son went to Australia, wouldn't come back. So the board of directors in 1960, in the absence of Dunville's board of directors, the chairman, in the absence of a son to lead the company, they closed the company down. They voted to close the company down because there was no Dunville's heir to be chairman of the board. I mean, unbelievable decision in today's terms, but it shows you the difference in class and difference in attitudes today compared to, what's that, 86 years ago. We resurrected the brand in 2012 whenever we decided to build our distillery. The idea for that was we were going to have a source whiskey brand. We didn't want to use the name Echlinville because Echlinville was grown to be for a field to glass. We didn't want to dilute that name. And we were offered the Dunville's name, and it was the biggest brand in the world, and the biggest Irish brand, and the biggest Belfast brand. So we jumped at the idea. And since then, we have been trying to put very, very good juice in the bottles. We made a promise to ourselves in 2013. We built a distillery at the height of a recession, or we decided to. So we made two promises. One, that we'd still be here in 10 years' time. We wouldn't let banks get into us or investors get into us. We would stay independent. And if that meant turning the stills off for 20 weeks a year, that's what we'd do. And that's what we've done for the last 10 years. We've stayed completely independent. And at a cost of, and the second thing we said was that we would take Dunville's on and try and put Dunville's back at the top table of world whiskies. Try and put Dunville's back to the top table of world whiskies. That's a 25-year job, but we're working away at it, and certainly by winning 7 awards at the Irish Whisky Awards last week, including Ireland's best whisky for the first time. I think we're starting to get there. So anyway, we'll pour 1808.
Oh yeah, I was going to say we can pour the 1808. It's interesting because we had a tasting with Glen Scotia the other night, Jarlath, and they were talking about the kind of the decline in Campbelltown whiskies from Campbelltown, and it sort of mirrors that story of Dunville's and Irish whiskey as a whole. And it's, I believe Dunville's even owned a distillery in Campbelltown at one point as well, didn't they?
It wasn't Campbelltown. It was oh god, the name's just left me. It was down near Stewartstown. Bladnoch.
Ah, right.
Yeah,
I for some reason I had Campbelltown in my head, but there you go.
In 1912, Dunville's had bought Bladnoch. So Dunville's had a big relationship with Scotland. So what a lot of guys, as you taste the 1808, I'll tell you why 1808 and 3 Crowns are relevant to Dunville's. So what a lot of people do not know, you have this misconception that Irish whiskies and Irish brands did not embrace the column still, did not embrace the coffee still in the way that Scottish whiskey did. And that's one of the reasons that Irish whiskey went into a great decline. That is true of the whiskey distilleries of Dublin and Cork in the south of Ireland. But up in the north of Ireland, it was always more industrious. It was always more industrious, be it shipbuilding, be it the linen industry, be it whatever. And the Belfast and Derry distilleries, so Dunville's in Belfast, Royal Irish, Watson, Derry, Avonhill, Conswater, these distilleries embraced the column stills in 1870s, 1860s, well before Scotland did. Who appointed, that's why Dunville's was the largest distillery in the world in the 1880s, because they were laying down an absolute load of grain whiskey as well as malt and pot still. So much so that they and Watts were subsidising grain whiskey into Scotland for a long time before Scotland got their capacity to make grain whiskey up. So in the late 19th century, start of the 20th century, a lot of the grain whiskey that was put in the Scottish blends was coming from Belfast and Derry, was coming from the likes of Dunville's. Dunville's was one of the biggest brands in the world at the turn of the century. The reason for that's quite simple. If you let in lots of whiskey, you have to sell lots of whiskey. And you following that old Irish motto of selling whiskey to bonders and having them bottle it out wasn't going to work whenever you're laying down 20 times more whiskey than you were last year. So Dunville's had to build a brand, and they had to take whiskey, they had to sell. I mean, Stephen's job became a lot harder, you know, so they developed absolutely cutting edge brand building techniques. They had 52 offices in 28 countries worldwide, 7 offices in the UK alone. They've grown as far as Uruguay, Australia, New York, Canada, all around the world. You know, Dunville's with building brands, having very unique advertising techniques. You'll see Dunville's mirrors and Dunville's memorabilia draping all the best whiskey bars in the world, and they're absolutely prolific in Ireland. So whenever some of the Dublin and Cork whiskies were still selling their whiskey on their white label or to bonders to bottle out for them, Dunville's, just by the very nature of how much whiskey they had to sell, that necessitated building a worldwide brand. So I mean, Dunville's was truly one of the first worldwide whiskey brands. Mm-hmm. A fascinating, absolutely fascinating story. An absolute powerhouse of Belfast, had their own railways, had their own football club, 456 employees. The football club still plays to this day. Distillery FC still play in the Irish League. For the last 5 years, Dunville's has once again been the shirt sponsor. Something we're very, very proud of.
I've heard they're a team with a lot of spirit.
We do
have a couple of great tasting notes coming in there as people are nosing that 1808. The hints of dry smoke, juicier fruit with sweet spice, lively on the nose. This is Martin grapefruit, pear drop sweets. Yeah. There's a tiny hint of sweet smokiness lurking in there somewhere. There was another question from Joe, which I will come on to, Joe. I'm not skipping it. I just thought maybe because this is really interesting, Jarlath, and I'd love to come back to it. But just while people are nosing and tasting the 1808, could you speak more specifically, or maybe Stephen would rather?
Stephen can talk about this one. This is one of his duties.
Yeah. So before I joined Echlinville, I probably had quite a comfortable job. I worked for one of the big guys, but I've been friends with Jarlath a long time, and he was like, "Listen, we're trying to scale up Echlinville, and this is what we want to do." And I can remember at the time he was like, and when I met him, he had all these amazing 20-year-old whiskies, and this is what we have. And I'm like, I love drinking really, really good 20-year-old whiskies, but they're very, very hard to sell. I mean, there's only a certain amount of people that one can afford to buy a 200 quid bottle of whiskey, but there's only so many customers around the world that are distributors around the world that actually want to buy 20-year-old whiskies. So the one product that they didn't have, which was this product, which is Dunville's 1808. And for this product, when I said at the very start that it's probably the most difficult whiskey we've ever tried to make. I think I went off drinking whiskey for maybe 2 months after this because there were so many trials. But the key to this whiskey is that when you have a blended whiskey and it's your kind of flagship whiskey, it needs to be one friendly to mixologies or mixologists. So it needs to be integrated with cocktails. One, it needs to be how I enjoy drinking a whiskey is with a pint of Guinness. It needs to be a whiskey that stands up against a pint. It needs to be a whiskey that stands up on its own. And the final part, it needs to be something that every consumer will try and they'll say, okay, that's the best whiskey I've ever tried, or it's not the best whiskey I've tried, but I can easily drink it and I like it. So what we done with this is that, and Kevin and Martin are quite correct. So to be friendly with the mixologists, and we have put in a tiny bit of peated smoke or peated whiskey for the smokiness, to have that kind of lovely spiciness and mouthfeel, to be kind to the connoisseur. What we've done is that we've put in some Echlinville pot still whiskey, which at Echlinville we make a very heavy, spicy whiskey. And then for all the fruitiness, we've used a first fill bourbon cask again. And again, everything we do is first fill bourbon, but we've brought in some virgin oak casks as well for the grain, to give us that little bit more of a structure and a backbone to this whiskey. So yeah, there's a lot of different components within this, and this is the whiskey that I was saying earlier. If you add a tiny bit of water to it, you'll see how the smoke really starts to develop. And within this is the key to that kind of other aspect of, do you really want to make a cocktail? Or when our brand ambassador Seamus, who probably has the best job in the world, for him this whiskey is key, because once you add the water to it, the smoke really develops. And where the guys are, Kevin and Martin were kind of saying, is there smoke there somewhere, or is there something there? What's this dry wood smoke? Or where then when the water goes into it, really starts to develop. So yeah, this is kind of, it's our flagship brand, but it's one that kind of has to tick a lot of boxes. It just can't be like 3 Crown Sherry, where it's, yeah, this is a really nice whiskey. It's very easy to drink. It's a great mouthfeel. It's great flavors. There's a nice bit of alcohol in it. This one, 1808, is kind of like, okay, I have all of that, but I have to be 10 times more different.
I think that was a challenge with 1808. I remember when Stephen joined us, we had 3 Crowns in the portfolio, which to me is an absolutely gorgeous sipping blended whiskey. It's your first whiskey of the night, etc., of the day. It wasn't a mixologist whiskey. It didn't have the backbone, the cut through a long drink, the cut through a highball. It didn't have enough. It's just a really light, easy whiskey. It wasn't punching through in the cocktails either. This whiskey is seven, possibly 8 different components. There's 4% peanut malt in there. There's 2 different pot stills. There's 2 different grains and 4 different malts, including grain and malt in first fill bourbon and grain and malt in First American oak. That First American oak gives it backbone. It gives that peat somewhere to embed itself, but it gives a real body to the whiskey that will punch through in a whiskey and ginger or soda in a highball, but it also works very well in a cocktail. It really does. A lot of whiskeys, when you put them into a long drink, you can just lose the whiskey completely. So we had to build this whiskey from the ground up in a way that it would make its presence felt and would enhance any long drink it was in, and not just get lost. And that would punch through and enhance it and almost multiply the flavor. And that was a different. It took us a while to get this one right, because you're working with 7 or 8 different components, and you're trying to make it. Does it work in a highball? Does it work with ginger and soda? Does it work in your standard cocktails? Does it work in a whiskey sour type idea? And then does it work beside a pint?
Yeah,
and balancing all of that took us a while.
And does it work in the pocket? I mean, this is like $32.95 on our website, which obviously everyone here will be getting 15% off that afterwards as well, which I think, for what it is exceptional value. And the smoke inside, there's some great comments coming in there. But the smoke reminds me of, people often talk about bonfire smoke and all these different type of things when we're talking about smoke and whiskey. But for me, it's almost like a Swedish log or something. There's just this kind of piney sweetness to it. Joe has said that water definitely brings out the smoke but retains the sweetness. Kevin says good Irish old fashioned. Martin says lively in the mouth, dances in the tongue, beautifully smooth, spicy, fruity, and perhaps a bit biscuity. I'm getting the smokiness more on the nose than on the palate, which I can totally see that. Yeah, there's definitely more noticeable drop of water. I like it, but sips down too well, which is a good complaint. Lovely taste, more off it, as they say. Alex says, is this all distilled at Echlinville, including the peated component? So maybe
no. So Echlinville does not distill grain whiskey. We only distill malt and a pot still. So the grain whiskey component in this is sourced. The malt whiskey component is mostly sourced, and the pot still is a mixture of probably half our own and half sourced. So you will find this product develop to have more of our malt and all of our pot still in about 2 years' time. Our grain will always be sourced, well, until we build a grain distillery, it will be sourced, and there's no immediate plans for that. So this will evolve into the malt and pot still as Echlinville, and the grain is sourced. But at the minute, that's still evolving. Yeah. At the minute, that's still evolving.
Kevin's point is very good, like the Irish old fashioned. So in today's world, in the spirits world, in the kind of mixology world, I don't know that much about it, but I'm not a whiskey and ginger is kind of to my extent of a cocktail. But
also your nickname.
Yeah. Oh Jesus. I'm glad this is recorded. This is a huge argument all over here. He's bullying on 2 whiskeys and he's bullying me. Thank God we're mates outside of this.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't have said it if we weren't. Bit of banter.
But so within the mixology world, what's really kind of taken off over the last 5 years is peated spirits. So the likes of mezcals or piscos, those type of spirits, but they've become so difficult to get and so expensive to get. So where Seamus, our brand ambassador, is kind of really targeting or really going after this kind of lack of a product in the market is with this product, because again, the smokiness is there, but it's kind of a really good twist of an Irish penicillin or Irish old fashioned, something in it that really makes sense. And it's, for me, the one thing I always get in this, and I don't know if no one's pointed it out yet, but when you add a tiny bit of water to it, you get banana bread.
Yeah.
Well, so I always think that this is the only whiskey that we have that I get that kind of banana bread taste to it, where it's our banana bread nose to it. I don't get it on the palate, but on the nose is kind of that banana bread really comes through, and it's kind of, there's been lots of fruit and that kind of biscuity flavor that Martin was saying. Yeah, it's there.
It does give you flashbacks to the first lockdown.
And there's definitely a lot of lemon in there too, which is Kevin is saying. There's definitely a lot of lemon in there.
Yeah, lemon meringue.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I mean, if you like, Luke touched on it earlier that we do a peated version of the Three Crowns, and that's probably more your traditional, peated whiskey. Again, it's a blend. It's not a single malt, and again, everything's kept quite light, so it's a lighter whiskey with a lighter peat. But it's definitely a more defined and more traditional peat than what you might find in this, which Luke is right. This one's more of a more modern peat. It's not that iodine-y, it's more of a campfire, whatever, type thing. The Dunville Three Crowns peated is more of that traditional peated whiskey, albeit a blend and albeit a very light version. So if you're looking for that lighter traditional peated whiskey, I would definitely recommend the Three Crowns. The Three Crowns peated. This one is more of a modern blend.
Yeah,
I think the old-fashioned one's right in the head with this one.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely, and just as I say, the discount, the 15% off these whiskies that were traced inside, it also extends to the peated for anyone who has. Just to repeat that, just before we move on Stephen's point about the old or the cocktails and everything, from my background in hospitality, what you used to get is a lot of particularly Americans and tourists coming in to cocktail bars in Ireland and being like, and I presume the same thing happens here in Scotland, where people come in and they're like, oh, I want to try this classic cocktail that I drink at home, but I want to try it with your Irish whiskey. Do you know, because I'm here, and I would almost refuse to put one of your more popular blended Irish whiskies in a whiskey sour and old fashioned, because they just totally get lost. They work best with bourbons for a reason, because they're tannic, they're punchy, they're big flavors that come through. Do you know, anyone who's had a bourbon or a lot of American whiskey will instantly recognize why they work in these cocktails, because cocktails are also about balancing flavor and creating complexity, which it's very hard to do with some of your more famously kind of more delicate or fruity, as they like to market themselves, kind of Irish blends. Whereas this is both easy sipping, but also has a viscosity and that bit of peat kick that would allow it to carry through in a mixed drink, you know. So it totally makes sense, everything you were saying about the high.
And I think about between 35 and 40% of this blend is from Virgin American oak.
Mm-hmm.
So that the very nature of that Virgin American oak gives it some of those characteristics that you'd expect, you know, that make bourbons work so well in cocktail.
No, 100%, yeah. Martin says lively in the mouth, dances in the tongue, beautifully smooth. But James also I said this is just a decent, easy drinker. Love the hint of peat. Finish with the sweetness afterwards, slight tannin aftertaste, which I like, which is probably coming from that virgin oak, as you were mentioning. I can see that it's been good in espresso martini. It might be a good time to come on to the Dunville's 10-year-old PX. But while we're getting that poured, if you don't mind me jumping ahead, lads, is Kevin would be delighted with your Waterford reference earlier on, Jarlath. James has been asking for a Waterford tasting on here for a while. What was I going to say, which is what reminds me of Joe's question in terms of, you were mentioning your farm and your grain to glass. There was a question from Joe earlier on about the strain of barley that you're growing at the moment. Is there different types, or how do you approach that?
There is. I think that we're predominantly growing Olympus. Predominantly we are. Everything takes time at our place, you know. Conversations tend to take a while to come to fruition. We are looking at introducing Hunter this year, and we are looking at introducing some more heritage grains. But for the last 5 or 6 years, it's been predominantly Olympus we've been growing, because it's a strain of malted barley that would have been predominant in the Irish Peninsula in our area. So the area that we are in would have, County Down would grow about 70% of the arable crop of the barley in Northern Ireland. Certainly Waterford and Wexford and that sunny southeast of Ireland would be famous for being the breadbasket of Ireland in the, you know. But County Down, I remember reading our designer is also a historian, and he found this completely abstract report from 1936 that said there was 80 combines operational in Northern Ireland in 1936, and also 68 of them were in County Down. So by sheer extrapolation, County Down grows about 80% of the barley in Northern Ireland, and Ards Peninsula would grow the vast majority of that. So we are an area that's, you know, that's famous for growing malted barley. So much so that we have the old Ards Maltings, and the old Ards Maltings is a maltings facility on the Ards Peninsula, about 10 miles from our distillery. They used to do maltings for most of the Irish distilleries, from Bushmills, Old Cumber, Dunville themselves, down as far as Middleton. It closed down in the mid-80s, and actually just as of about 3 months ago, we purchased the old maltings with the idea of re-establishing maltings in the Irish Peninsula and getting that old maltings up and running for the first time in 40 plus years. That's a project that'll take 2 or 3 years. And as we bring our, if and when we bring a malting facility on board, then we will look at obviously a lot more heritage grains and et cetera, et cetera.
No, that's fantastic. It's really interesting, and it's definitely something that, and I think also with kind of Waterford have a heritage grain release coming out. I don't know if you tried any of them, but it's something that we get, that comes up in these chats a lot more now. People talk about provenance of grain and these type of things that, you know, as you know yourself, you would just never have heard of at tastings, or you know, even a couple of years ago. Definitely. So tell us about this, the PX 10-year-old. I don't know who wants to take the lead on that one.
So I'll start and then let Stephen jump in. So PX10 was pretty much the first whiskey we brought to market whenever we brought the Dunville brand back into existence. The bottle on the label is pretty much an exact copy of what the label was in and around the 1860s, and lasted right through to about 1933, whenever they changed it, 3 years before they closed down. But we stuck with the old label, and it's about a 99% replica. It's us doing, it's us honouring the old brand. We were very aware that whenever you bring the old brand back to market, that you can stand accused of just trying to profiteer on an old brand. We have been overcompensating for that for the last 10 years by putting exceptional liquid into the bottle and doing very nice branding based on the old brand. This is the first one we brought back. This is it's a 10 coming 11-year single malt. It spends 8 years in first fill bourbon cask, and then we introduce it into first fill PX hogsheads. So again, smaller cask. It will spend between 2 and 3 years in those PX casks, taking on just a lot of sweetness. A lot of those PX is famous for Christmas cake fruits and Christmas cake spices in brown syrup, in treacle molasses. PX by its nature is very sweet. It's about 14 times sweeter than Oloroso. So if you go to Jerez or go to Andalusia in southern Spain, Seville, wherever, they'll actually put PX on their ice cream, PX sherry, Pedro Jimenez sherry on their ice cream, in a way that we would put a raspberry syrup or a chocolate sauce. It's very thick, very viscous, very syrupy. And after 2 or 3 years in the cask, that syrupy nature comes into the whiskey. We make a 20-year-old version of this, but it's been in PX cask for 5 years, and it's just pure syrup. You know, it's just very, very decadent, very, very delicious. This one's more balanced between the malt, but you're certainly getting those Christmas cake fruits, you know, those prunes and dates and raisins and sultanas. You're getting that bitter nut in there, certainly almonds, but everything. Those are the flavors you get in all the Oloroso finished whiskies, but in PX finished whiskies, it's dates and prunes and raisins and figs, but all stewed down into a brown sugar. So all in a sugar syrup. So it's those same notes, but with all this brown sugar around them, you know. It's in that cask for about 3 years. We picked up, whenever Luke worked for the Irish Whiskey Awards, we picked the PX10 won the Irish Whiskey Award in 2015 for the best Irish single malt under 12 years old. In 2017, it went to a 12-year-old, and I think the 12-year-old then won best Irish single malt 12 years and younger. We brought back the 10-year-old this year, and this year it won best Irish single malt 11 years and younger. So we were really delighted that the new expression of 10-year-old again kept that tradition of winning the best single malt under 12 years old about 2 weeks ago. It's just the PX craft just works with this age.
Well, it's interesting, as you were saying there, Jarlath, because I mean, before I'd ever met you, and before Stephen was working with Echlinville, this was one of the whiskies that really made me fall in love with the brand. It was a decent price point. The label really stood out. It was incredible flavor. The finish went on forever, and you didn't get, even in Scotch at the time, you didn't. I mean, it wasn't unheard of, but it was much rarer to see a PX cask. They seem to be everywhere these days. So it ticked so many boxes. I was looking around there to see if I had a bottle of it knocking about here still, but I don't. I have a bottle of the cask strength 12-year-old. A little bit of housekeeping. At the moment we should have this one listed on the website before Christmas. And the next two we're going to try we're not able to stock until the new year, but the discount codes, when these products are in stock, I'll send everyone who bought this pack a reminder so that you'll be able to purchase it with the discount as if they were in stock now. But the 12-year-old version of this is currently in stock on the website, and the 15% discount I'll give out at the end will also work on that one if you did want to buy a bottle of that. And they're not a million miles apart, are they?
The stocks of the 12-year-old are dwindling, so if you fancy the 12-year-old, probably jump in there. So the difference between the 10 and the 12 is it's the same whiskey. The 12 has been in sherry for 4.5 years. The 10 has been in sherry for 2.5. So if you imagine this malt to sherry scale, where you have malt influence and sherry influence, the 10-year-old is maybe a third of the way along. You know, it's still very malt driven, but there's a definite PX sherry finish influence there. You know, it envelopes those sugars, envelope the whiskey, make it feel a lot more viscous, make it feel a lot more luxurious. But it's not, it's a sherry whiskey, but it's not a sherry bomb. The 12-year-old slides a lot further towards the sherry end of the scale. It starts to become more of a sherry bomb as much as a 12-year whiskey can be. Certainly by the time you get into the 20-year-old PX, it's a complete PX sherry bomb, just an absolutely phenomenal whiskey. If you like your sherry finished whiskeys, if you like this, but think you can tolerate a bit more sherry in it, the 12-year-old is an absolute stunner. A bit more weight, a bit more body, a bit more viscosity, a lot more of that brown sugar sherry influence. The malt is still there, the malt influence is still there, but it becomes a lot more about the sherry. Whereas with the 10-year-old, it stays fresher. And those lighter, those soft orchard fruits, apples and pears, and even ripe peaches, you know, those notes are still evident in this whiskey. The 12-year-old, you have to leave it for half an hour in a glass for those to run through. But it is a real, I love sitting them both side by side and trying them, because you can see the evolution of the same whiskey with 2 years more in sherry. Not telling you to buy both bottles, but it is a nice experiment to do, you know.
I think with the, like most of the guys are saying this in the chat, Martin, Kevin, kind of this Calvados, this apple, Irish whiskey, especially Irish malt at that kind of 6 to 10 years old, and it's actually a really good thing where people are saying it's that kind of has, someone was saying it has a sour taste or a tart taste as well. Benchmark this against the next two, and you'll see how the whiskey completely changes and the sweetness comes through it. So you will see the kind of more intensified, how those kind of tart flavors or apple flavors become a lot more intensified, and the kind of more like stewed apples, that lovely sweetness that is going on. But I think Jarlath won't mind me saying this, but probably will actually. But it probably doesn't make him look like a great AFD, but I'm more of a whiskey nerd. But for the 12-year-old, for us, we made a commitment probably 3 years ago that stocks of 12-year-old were getting very, very low. And we made a commitment that we would take 12-year-old off every single market apart from UK and Ireland. So that commitment meant that we didn't have enough liquid at 12-year-old to go around the world. And if we did, it would be a strict in and out. But we wanted a consistent flow of whiskey for 12 years old, and we didn't have any 12 years old. So within the 12-year-old, it's actually a 15-year-old. So this is why it's only exclusive to UK and Ireland, is that we don't have enough 12-year-olds to kind of really put out a big enough release. So for the 12-year-olds, we just do them as cask strength editions for our online shop, as a distillery exclusives. But for this kind of 12-year-old that is for sale in the whiskey shop, it's actually a 15-year-old at the moment. So yeah, that's why they're so scarce, and we kind of only have we don't have that much stock of it, which
Luke's holding up one of the cask strength 12-year-old.
I think this was the first or second release you did of the cask strength.
Yeah, we've done about 5 or 6.
People can at home. I know Stephen held up the label for the 10-year-old a minute ago. The labels are stunning.
This is a darker label, so we've taken the blue and turned it black on the dark series on the PX12 cask strength. These became a real cult whiskey in Ireland. We would release a cask at a time, maybe 2 or 3 a year. It got to the point where we would put them on our website, and after 94 seconds, they'd be sold out. And you spend the whole weekend taking calls and emails from irate customers who didn't get one, which was a nightmare. We used to try and hold a few back, and then would try and help them out the best we could. But it became a real cult whiskey. It just the cask strength version of it were just spectacular whiskeys. I think we released one a month ago, Stephen.
Yeah,
but maybe a month, 6 weeks ago. the Dunville's whiskey is funny enough, we make whiskey for drinking, not for collecting, so we're not big in packaging, we're not big in boxes and wooden boxes and presentation boxes. We like whiskeys to be bought and opened and drunk. We make whiskey for the enjoyment of drinking, not for the enjoyment of looking at them,
Unless it's a rum cask finish.
Yeah, and not apart from the rum cask finish, yeah.
Don't mention the water.
That's a different story. But because of that, you'll find that the Dunville whiskies don't attract much more on the secondary market, on the auction market, than they would, at the primary market. So if you do like your Dunvilles and want to try one of those 12 craft strengths, go on to some of the Irish whiskey options or even Scots whiskey options. You'll probably pick them up.
Celtic whiskey options,
and you'll pick them up for not much more than retail. Maybe just the auction fee more than retail. And the 12 craft strengths are absolute stunners. As Lurt will attest to.
Yeah, I managed to get 2 of these and drank one, and this is the other one, which I'm not saving to collect. I'm saving for a special occasion. Maybe my wedding. You never know.
Luke actually over his right hand shoulder there has a kind of quite rare bottle that we actually just recently released. So Old Cumber, which is
I have one of that as well.
Yeah. So this is our Echlinville pot still whiskey. So port and sherry cask was the original, but this kind of one in the yellow and green box is it's probably a unicorn whiskey outside of Ireland. It's quite rare. So 30-year-old single pot still.
From the original Old Cumber Distillery that closed down in 1956.
Yeah,
a very famous pot still distillery, County Down, famous for double distilling pot still. So made this really, really thick, really heavy, really viscous, oily pot still whiskey. Legend said that if you put a pencil in your glass, it would stay standing up. It was that thick, So we grew up in these legends of this old whiskey that was made 12 miles from where I grew up. It closed in 1956, so it's still a living memory. There's still people alive who worked in it, or there was when I was growing up, And so the fact that we got the Old Cumber brand 2 years ago was just phenomenal for us. We had been making pot still in the Old Cumber way from 2013, 5 or 7 years before we acquired the brand. That was just by luck that we acquired it. And that was our first release. So yeah, that's something to look forward to in the future.
Yeah, and that was that was the point I was going to get to that Joe had mentioned earlier about the strands of barley. And I think the great thing about a distillery the size Echlinville is that we can do a lot of these experiments, and we can go back to historical mash bills that kind of put Ireland around the world as a whiskey nation. And we've started to recreate those in Echlinville. So yeah, it's kind of more that you will see Echlinville spirit. Probably next year we'll, like our job probably for the last 10 years has been trying to build Dunvilles to a scalable brand, to a global brand, and we're kind of slowly but surely getting there. But next year we'll hopefully see something out of Echlinville stills, apart from just 5% going into some of the Dunvilles products. So yeah, it's something quite interesting to look forward to next year, where it's like it will be the kind of first release from Ireland's probably first foreign distillery since modern old times of Irish whiskey. So yeah, Ireland's first kind of modern farm distillery, which is interesting.
No, it's fantastic. There's some great comments coming in there, folks, since we've been sipping this PX. The PX and ice cream is delicious, says Martin. Alex is lovely, sweet and sour on the nose, as you mentioned, referenced earlier. Stephen is rich and deep flavour. Jonathan's question about the price of the upcoming releases. I don't actually have those, Jonathan. I'm sorry, but when we'll include them on the email when they do come in. Craig says feels a little oily in the mouth. And a long finish. I totally agree with the finish. I've finished mine a while ago, which Chris has kind of touched on. 3 sale wasn't enough for this one, he says, and I'm the same, but I can still taste it. It's got a fantastic finish. Before we come on to the next one, is there anything you wanted to say, or anyone wanted to ask about the 10-year-old PX? No, perfect, marvelous. So the next one is a bit of a change in sherry styles. Obviously, you give a very eloquent explanation of Pedro Jimenez there, Jarlath. Could you tell us about the 21-year-old Palo Cortado?
Yeah, so I think you touched on it. Whenever we brought out the PX10, we were probably the first guys in Ireland to use the Pedro Jimenez, the PX craft commercially. I think the only guys that had done it in a whiskey before might have been the Celtic Whisky Shop in their Celtic Cask collection.
Yeah, I know there was a few odd sherry casks in the Celtic Cask collection, and in a few Cooley Distillery independent bottlings for Celtic whiskey. Although Stephen would know.
But now the PX craft seems to be quite prolific in Ireland.
I think Dunville's was, I think from my own memory, Dunville's was the first to use PX, and I think
on a commercial release.
Yeah, well, on any release, I don't think there was ever a PX before. Because we're probably going back to 2012, 2013 year. So Palo Cortado.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
The reason I say that is when I drank the Palo Cortado sherry finished Irish whiskey, and I'm pretty sure we're the first guys to do a commercial release of Irish whiskey finished in Palo Cortado, with the possible exception of Celtic Whisky Shop again with their own single cask collection.
They done Celtic Cask again. Celtic Cask 1 was Palo Cortado.
But we're seeing a few more distilleries using Palo Cortado. We've had success with it for the last 3 years, including this year, whenever the cask strength version of this, or the single cask version of this, won Ireland's best whiskey for 2022. It won the best cask strength whiskey and then went into the overall and won the overall best Irish whiskey. What you're trying tonight is the same whiskey that won the Irish Whiskey Awards, but down to 46% for a core release. Again, it's single malt. It's 15 years in first fill sherry cask. Actually, this is a mixture of first fill and second fill sherry cask for the Palo Cortado, for reasons that the Palo Cortado is a lighter sherry, so we want it a bit of. And then this is actually spent the guts of 6 years. Nearly 6 years in a first fill Palo Cortado hogshead. So again, smaller craft. And we find that Palo Cortado craft can be left for a long time. The PX after 3, 4, 5 years, we start to worry about it getting overwooded and over tannic. The Palo Cortado just seems to go on and on forever, and just the older it gets, the more in these deeper cigar notes and deeper tobacco and leather and those deeper base notes it adds. So this is a 21-year-old whiskey written at 46%. It's a fattening of probably 6 casks. So there's about 2,000 bottles of this to go out. You might see it before Christmas, might see it probably slightly after Christmas. You'll see it. And again, we talked about the Dunville specialising in sherry finished whiskies. It's not just a bottle that says sherry finish on it. We specialise in certain types of sherry finished whiskies. So we do a PX finish, we do a Palo Cortado finish, and we do an Oloroso finish, and we do all those separately, so as you can very clearly see the differences in what those 3 casks bring. We're not 6-month finishes. We're 18-month finish. We're for the 3 crowns. We're 2.5, 3 years for the PX10, 5 years for the PX12, 6.5 years for the Palo Cortado 21, and 4.5 years for the next one. So we believe in big, in your face, very evident sherry influence. It's not a finish. It's a second maturation. It's not a finish. It's not a 6-month or 9-month finish. It's a 6-year second maturation. Certainly with this one, the sherry impregnates every aspect of the whiskey. It just becomes one. Those sugars that are in the sherry cask just envelope the alcohol, make it just so drinkable. Even at cask strength 55, the sugars just make it so drinkable. The sugars in that PX10, it's the sugars that give it the length, that give it that long finish. So if you imagine like a 64-bit sugar solution or a very syrupy drink, and just how thick and how it lines your mouth, if you get lots of sugars into your whiskey, they do the same thing. So they take these big sherry flavors like sultanas and Christmas cake, dates, raisins, nuts, spices, and they just hold those with the alcohol and just line the side of your mouth, line your tongue, and just make it go on forever. Give it a lovely, luxurious, viscous mouthfeel. But they also link the nose, the palate, and the finish So as what you get on the nose relates to the palate, it's the same story through nose, palate, and finish, but that story develops. It gets more interesting as you go along. It's not a whiskey where the nose and the palate are separate and don't have any relationship to each other. We try and get a lot of balance in our whiskies, and balance means does the sherry furnish? Is it the right for the malt? Is it put at the right alcohol volume, etc., etc.? So matching the sherry furnish to the malt to the alcohol volume, making sure the alcohol volume isn't too high or too low, getting the sugars. But it's also, does the whiskey, is there a balance in the story from start to finish? Does the whiskey tell, does it connect and progress through the nose, the palate to that long finish?
Yeah, I think. Sorry, I'm going to think. Alex was saying, which is reminds him a lot of Glenfarclas 21, and I think Jarlath kind of, if you've been in a tasting with Jarlath, we kind of talk about this a lot, that we're great admirers of certain distilleries, and the kind of Glenfarclas's. I mean,
I think I think 21's the best of Glenfarclas core range anyway, so I'm glad he put the 21.
Yeah, where I think that kind of, and again, as people are saying, it's that lighter style of whiskey, and Palo Cortado as a sherry is that lighter style, and for us, it's something it's not widely used. It's many people don't really understand it. And when you go to sherry at 21 years old, it has to, if it's not the color of a boot polish, people kind of just like, oh, it can't be a 21-year-old sherry cask. And I think between going from the PX to this and then to the next when we'll try the Oloroso, for us, where we use many different types of sherry. So we have some Manzanilla casks, we have Fino casks. Obviously, we have a Amontillado cask for our 1808 range that we'll somewhere down the line try and do kind of small batch releases. But again, for the big kind of powerhouse whiskies that we use, Palo Cortado, PX, and Oloroso. And I always find with this whiskey, and sometimes the guys disagree with me, but when you were younger and you kind of had a hot chocolate, someone said earlier about melted chocolate, is that when you kind of had the Cadbury's hot chocolate and you lifted the foil off it and you had that kind of milk chocolate dust aroma go into your nose. I think with this whiskey, it's kind of that kind of nice little chocolate flavor is definitely within it, and it's not as if it's that kind of real buttery, creamy, melted chocolate. It's that kind of just that dust that is there. But yeah, there's loads of, like for us, the kind of spiciness is there, the treacle is there. Yeah, there's Martin is pretty much nailed on to what we is, and or to what we think it is, and yeah, that kind of rich fruitcake from Joe as well. Yeah,
I'll tell you, someone that I guess I pick up something different in this whiskey from that isn't as obvious, but I followed it from the very, very start, from when it went in the cast 6 years ago. And Palo Cortado, the Palo Cortado sherry is formed by accident. You can't set it to make a Palo Cortado sherry. You set it to make a Fino, and the yeast in the Finos in the barrel, the yeast in the Fino will form a crust over the top of the sherry, what they call flour, FLOR. It's a yeast crust. And then what happens is that the Fino, the secondary fortification fermentation in the cask happens anaerobically. In a Fino, so what happens in the absence of oxygen, there's a crust keeps the oxygen out. So whenever the crust is formed, whenever the floor is formed, the guy in the bodega will draw a line across the barrel head to say that the crust is formed. Then about 3% of the Finos at some point during the secondary fortification, the crust will break, the floor will break and sink, and air will get in, and that will go from being fortified anaerobically to fortified aerobically. At that point, what they do is they draw a cross diagonally across the line to say the floor is now broken. Palo Cortado means broken line, broken stick, so it just means I've broken the line. There's no floor anymore. But interestingly, at that point of whenever the floor breaks, but before it sinks, lactobacteria go to action. And lactobacteria start working on the sugars in the floor in the crust. and it only happens for about a week before the floor sinks into the sherry, and it doesn't happen anymore. But in that wait in these lactobacteria, the same bacteria that would be in milk and make milk go off type idea. Do you know that sharpness you get in a milk just before it turns, but you know it's going to turn because there's a sharpness on it? It's quite a similar sharpness to what you get in a Greek yogurt, in a natural yogurt.
It's like a kefir, that type of.
Yeah. So that is very evident in a Palo Cortado sherry, and it's evident in the whiskey for the first maybe year. So whenever you put a whiskey in a sherry in a Palo Cortado cask for a year, the first note that comes in is a sharp, almost natural yogurt type. And then what you do is you spend the next 4 or 5 years building up all these other flavors over it and layering it up. So this sharpness, it's still in that whiskey, and if you try it now, go looking for it, you'll find it. It's almost with the alcohol. It's almost indiscernible from the alcohol, but that's what it is. But after 3, 4, or 5 years in the cask, you build up all those other Palo Cortado sherry notes around it, and it just becomes, that sharpness makes the whiskey brilliant. Whereas you have all those traditional sherry notes from a traditional Oloroso, but to have this different layer to it, different angle to it with this sharpness that's in there. And if you just need to build that whiskey up and let it mature enough to get over that, so that sharpness integrates and becomes something bigger than it was, something better than it was, and it's just a whiskey that's better than all the sum of its parts for that reason.
Yeah,
that's something that I put out on it because I know it was there 6 years ago, and I've watched how it's become, how it's went from something that was very noticeable to something that's completely integrated into the whiskey and makes it special.
Yeah, the amazing thing I find about Palo Cortado is it's a whiskey that you'll try it 5 different times, and while you'll have the core bouquet of flavors that you will always get, it will keep on changing, or you'll see a different direction, because it's not generally, as I was saying previously, it's in Scottish whiskey, it's kind of always Oloroso, and as we kind of see in a lot of Irish whiskey, we're probably more PX now than we've ever been. There's more PX releases than anything, but also kind of still the majority is Oloroso. Where this one, it's something that it is light, but there's so much flavor. One sip you'll try it and it's light, but then the second sip, all the flavor comes through. Then towards the end of it, the third sip, the spice and the chocolate and everything comes into it.
And then after 20 minutes in the glass, we get some warmth into it. You just get this lovely sweet tobacco, this lovely, really sweet tobacco, and almost like an old leather note that you only get from leaving single malt and sherry and good sherry cask for a very long time.
The first time I tried the single cask versions of this, we discussed this in the past, Jarlath, the juiciness that would the way we kind of water. I mean, it's still there to an extent, but it's definitely not as present. But in a weird way, that's almost a good thing for me, because this is the first time I've tried this that hasn't been one of the single cask versions, and it allows you to appreciate the kind of complexity that is there, like the kind of different elements you get. So there is a real nuttiness, there's a dryness. There are some of those kind of more. I definitely get the cut grass that was mentioned earlier. I used to get that off the older 10-year-old before you discontinued it. You used to get lots of cut grass on the nose, and I can kind of get that here again. And definitely what Stephen was saying about the chocolate, it's interesting. And Joe was some great comment there with this is bursting with flavor, rich fruit cake topped with chocolate. There's just tried this after eating a piece of dark chocolate. Amazing. Kevin says it tastes like a favorite cigar. So you even have those tobacco-y notes, as you were saying, the kind of oakiness.
To me, this is an absolute cigar malt. That's exactly what this is. And especially at craft strength, it just works perfectly.
No, 100%. I can see how it did so well in the winning Irish Whiskey of the Year. James has said a well-rounded drink, perfect for a cold evening. It's interesting. I might be misremembering this, but I can't remember which one of you said it. But saying this in a moment when the single cask were coming out, the original Palo Cortado single cask you bought out was at the start of 2020. That you were rightly so very proud of. You said, I think it was yourself said to me, Jarlath, and maybe it was Graham, said that at one point you were maybe a bit nervous about how it was going to go in terms of casking these, and you were saying there about watching them develop and seeing it come through. But you said there was a moment when you doubted yourself, or am I misremembering that?
I think we doubt ourselves a lot more on the pH side of things, because the pH, by the very nature of the craft, can be a lot more tonic, and you can get a lot more wood spice and a lot more tannin out of the pH crafts. So certainly with the pH crafts, we're very careful after maybe 4.5 years, 5 years in pH. We're very careful to monitor them quite regularly to look for that drying spice that can be a sign of that maybe overly tannic note coming through. With the Palo, so we released 3 bottles of this as single cask at 18 years old. Haven't been in Cortado for 3 or 4 years. This is now the same batch at 21 years old. It's been in for 6 years. The 18-year-old was fresher. This is more complexity to it, a bit more weight to it. The 18-year-olds were gorgeous, but were gorgeous in a different way, in a fresher, lighter, almost like comparing the PX10 to the PX12 type idea. Now, look, we have probably, I would have no worries with leaving this, so it's 25 years old, and leaving it in the Palo craft for another 5 years. I don't see, I don't really see anything there that's worrying me that, you know, that the craft can do anything adverse to it. And that time, we always keep an eye on our craft and taste them every 3 months anyway, you know, and then more often if needed. But no, with this one, I wouldn't be worried now. Not to the pH worry us more.
Yeah. Someone, Kevin said earlier, we're going to do something with brandy cask. We put some 19-year-old malt into Armagnac casks 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks? No, 2 months ago, 3 months ago.
It was June. It doesn't seem like 6 months ago, but it was June.
Time flies when you're having fun, huh?
So we put a 19-year-old single. So we had these Grand Mole, M-O-L-E, a very, very, very special Armagnac. I think that was up in the 30 or 40-year-old Armagnac. It was, the casks themselves were about 80 years old, just ridiculous Armagnac. And a friend of ours across in Gran Canaria had bought the cask and bottled all the juice. The Armagnac's amazing. I have a bottle in the house somewhere. After tasting the Armagnac, the Grand Mole, we wanted the cask. Then he offered us whatever cask we wanted. We said, right, we'll take that. Well, we put a single malt new make and a pot still new make into 2 more Armagnac casks, but they were a lot younger Armagnacs. They were about 20 years old and 15 years old. They were from new make, but we put this 19-year-old into this really old, really musky, really saturated, you know, I mean, it was some ridiculous flavors in it. So we tasted it actually about a fortnight ago and sent a sample across to Shane in Gran Canaria. It's going to be an absolute cracker. It's lovely already, but you just know that give it another 2 years, you know, just be brave, and, you know, you taste it and it's nice. Yeah, that's good whiskey. But if you just be brave and leave it for 2 more years, you know, where others might say, yeah, that's worth, bring it out, we tend to just leave it and be brave and see what happens, because then it just becomes what you have here, you know. So yeah, we have some absolutely stunning Armagnac on the way.
Yeah, and this is what kind of feeds back into what Luke was saying in terms of the kind of taking risks. And for us with Dunville's, we're very well known for having kind of higher age statement single malts, but having a lot of kind of single casks of in the kind of 19. So we have a 19-year-old Madeira, we have 20-year-old PXs, 21-year-old Palo Cortados. Yeah, so for us, these are always the big gamble, because when these whiskies are released, they're 200 quid plus per bottle. So when we transfer one of these into Armagnac, it's like we try our best to kind of forget about it, because it's a huge risk if it goes wrong, because there's a lot of money tied down within it. Yeah, and as most of you will know, there's not that much single malt at 20 years plus in Ireland, as there would be kind of readily available in Scotland, and not even as much in Scotland anymore. I mean, the kind of luxury single malt category is kind of dwindling as years go on, and prices get higher and higher. So yeah, but again, for us, it's about kind of always trying to innovate with our higher age statements. And as Luke was saying at the start, 10 years ago we were doing PX. Now it seems that everyone is doing PX. So yeah, it's quite interesting.
No, totally. We've actually, I think, I don't want to be apocryphal here because obviously this is being recorded, but as far as I remember, we had Brendan McCarron on, who's the master distiller for Distell. He did one of our recent ones we did with Deanston, and he's done a couple of these same virtual tastings with us on the digital drams. And he was kind of saying that digital drams, that Pedro Jimenez casks are almost totally played out at this stage. Like, you just see them everywhere. Just kind of, not that they're not good in their own right, but that you almost get bored of another PX cask release. So it must be a really interesting feeling from you guys to be at that kind of cutting edge and really and innovating. And there is, you're saying about the pressure of not wanting to make a mistake with mature malt because it's so rare, which we'll come on to in a second with Alex's question there. It must be hard to also, it's like the difficult second album. Like, you can innovate with your first ones, and then suddenly you've got something to lose, and you have to kind of protect your position. Would you like to take up Alex's question there, and why is why are the Old Irish whiskies so rare?
Yeah, so like this is the big thing. So within Ireland before 1987, we had only 2 distilleries. So we had Middleton Distillery in Cork, and we had Bushmills Distillery in Antrim. So one at the bottom and one at the top of the island. Middleton Distillery was an amalgamation of 3 different brands, so Jameson, Powers, and Paddy. So they completely amalgamated together, and also made Tullamore Dew within that distillery. So for the space of until Cooley Distillery was founded in 1987, there wasn't any other whiskies there wasn't any other distilleries in the market making whiskey. So Middleton famously didn't make single malt; they made grain and they made pot still whiskey. Barry Crockett, who was their master distiller, probably the most famous distiller in Ireland, he always said that single malt whiskey wasn't something that Middleton could make because of the size of their pot still. So they're using 100,000 litre stills at the time, where if you think of somewhere like Macallan was using probably, I think, 13,000 litre stills. So it was quite rare. So if you really think of 20-year-old whiskey, like we're going back to the turn of the millennium, 13 years before that, there was only 2 distilleries in the island of Ireland. We're now quite lucky, but even if you look at it in terms of sales, it was less than 1 million cases of Irish whiskey sold globally. I think now we're kind of 14 million cases sold globally. So yeah, it's something that is quite rare to have these older malts, and they are quite precious to us because we can never compete with 40-year-old Scotch or 50-year-old Scotch or 30-year-old Scotch. But where there's a lot of whiskey at the moment is kind of within these, well, not a lot, but within these 20-year-olds. It's 5 years ago, you could have bought a 15-year-old as easily as you want. But now the kind of 20-year-old whiskies, they're not really that easy to get. Most distilleries that have them don't want to sell them. Someone, Jonathan said, is Cooley your main source. I'm going to say that Bushmills is triple distilled whiskey predominantly at this age level. We only use double distilled whiskey, and Cooley only double distilled. So
I think we have,
Cooley, but yeah, it's double distilled.
We have signed and this is, it's hard to be transparent whenever you sign a non-disclosure agreement. The answer to that question is not no. It's probably the best way we can put it.
But it's double distilled.
Yeah, I mean, you can do a bit of detective work, although there is I suppose, we only go down the rabbit hole now. There's more complexities to the double distilled, single distilled, or triple distilled, which is one of the other kind of great myths about Irish whiskey, that it's all triple distilled. And
I think what I would say is that Cooley malt is vastly underrated around the world. if you take Cully malt and put it in the right cask and leave it for long enough, you can make absolutely sensational whiskies. That's been shown by some of the older tilling releases and some of the stuff that we've done. You know, Cully malt has just, it's the right amount of sweetness and body to it, but it's also got the right amount of space left in it that you can really work a cask. You know, so we're massive fans of that Cully malt, especially the older it gets.
Yeah, well, Alex has said there the oldest he's seen they've seen is a Cooley 24-year-old. We actually have a 1991 Bushmill single cask whiskey shop exclusive. Alex, if you want to check it out on the website, it's exceptional value for money. 29 years old, I think it was bottled. Distilled in 91. It's a very good whiskey.
Is that one of the Causeway releases?
It's a Causeway, but a Causeway done exclusively for the whiskey shop.
Yeah.
So yeah.
What's the cask finish, Luke?
I think it's port off the top of my head, but that's a great question. I should know that.
Yeah, some of those older Causeways, some of those older ones that, you know, the 25 milligers and that are very, very good. Very, very good.
I think Bushmills, actually both Bushmills and Cooley whiskey, that's that kind of early 90s Irish whiskey is some of the the best we've distilled on this island. Like, there's some exceptional stuff that comes out there, but even from Connemara early 90s casks, some of that Teeling stuff that's won awards recently, it's coming out from the early 90s. And like some of the older Bushmills we've tried from that period are exceptional. There's it's almost like a roughness, a mustiness to it that really serves well over time. Like
there was a incredible. So there's a Connemara single cask that dates back to myself and Luke worked for the same employer at different times, and they released a 1992 Connemara single cask, and at the time it was an 18-year-old or 19-year-old
Amontillado, wasn't it?
Yeah, Amontillado sherry cask, and I think it was like cask 192 or something 182 or 192.
I think you're spot on. Yeah, 192. Yeah.
And it was this kind of, it's slowly become this unicorn whiskey, and I can remember. it's quite amazing how whiskey has changed, but I can remember that we had this single cask 18 or 19-year-old single peated single malt in a 80-year-old Amontillado sherry cask, one of the rarest sherry casks in Ireland, and it was like 90 quid a bottle.
Mm-hmm.
And like one of the best Irish whiskies ever made.
Yeah.
And we struggled to sell it.
Yeah.
It took like 5 years to sell 600 bottles. Where it's like now something like that sells out. Like we, as Jarlath was saying earlier, we released a 18-year-old single cask and it sells out in minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So it's amazing how the kind of Irish whiskey industry has.
I think 94 seconds is our fastest.
Yeah.
The website just about stood up to it.
There's tablets you can take for that, Jarlath. But Ian is correcting me there with Madeira cask, and he's spot on. I should have known that it is a Madeira cask, and I've tried it. It's an exceptional whiskey. I think it's 695 at the moment. So I mean, considering the rarity of Irish whiskey from that period and stuff, it's not cheap.
We know that Bushmills,
it is what it is.
Yeah, we know that Bushmills and Madeira work from the Bushmills 21, so it makes sense.
Yeah.
So here we'll head on to the last one.
Yeah, no, I think some people might have moved on already. I know I kind of have been sniffing it away, but yeah.
So this is our 20-year-old Oloroso. So yeah, I'll let Jarlath jump in here. So yeah, for me, this was like Oloroso is for us is some of our best whiskies. We've released a couple of single casks, and common now is that. And people always ask why'd you do a 46% whiskey? And for us, we never had a core release of older whiskies. And when I say a core release, I mean a smaller batch. And for us, our small batches are kind of 2,000 to 3,000 bottles at a time. But as our business is growing globally, and places like the whiskey shop are asking, well, what does Dunville's have outside of? Do you have anything older than a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old? For us, we had all the liquid, but we didn't have whiskies that we could have put into a core release. So we had to do single casks for a market. And as our brand is developing, countries in Europe will not take 600 bottles of something at €200 or €300 a bottle. So we brought out the core range of Palo Cortado 21 and a Oloroso 20-year-old, and somewhere along the line we'll probably bring out a bigger age statement in our PX range. So yeah, for these, they're all at 46%, and it's more that we can ensure that we have them around the world and they're available, where you're not fighting for 94 seconds to try and buy one and be let down. So I'll let Jarlath come on to this one, because I know this is one of his favorites.
I think on the whiskey, this is one that, the Palo Cortado that we had previously, the gorgeous whiskey. If you get a cask strength version of that Palo Cortado, it's markedly better again. The 21-year-old at cask strength, it won the best whiskey in Ireland for a reason. It is exceptional. The one we had today is very, 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 very good, but the one at cask strength is exceptional. The Oloroso at 46%. We do Oloroso at cask strength. They're very, very, very good. The Oloroso at 46%, it doesn't lose anything for coming down from cask strength to 46%. If anything, it gains that creaminess from adding that bit of water to it. And again, the Oloroso, it's that Goldilocks and the Three Bears. It's the one in the middle. You have Palo Cortado and you have PX, and Oloroso is just the one in the middle. It's the sherry that everybody uses. From Redbreast to Macallan to, we make sherry furnished whiskies because we love Glendronach, we love Glenallachries. We love what Billy Worter does. We love Glenfarclas's, the older Glenfarclas's, especially the older Glenfarclas's that are bottled by somebody like Cadenheads, who will put out older Glenfarclas's in the 52-53%, ABV range, But that's as much as I like Glenfarclas, I just want a wee bit more alcohol in sometimes, That's why Glendronach does it so well, from their 15 to their 21. The 18 can take their leave, and then all those similar casks are just spectacular. And they're mostly Oloroso and obviously PX as well, which is where we got our PX influence from. This is a 20-year-old Oloroso sherry cask, 4 years in Oloroso. It just does what it says in the tin. It just does what a 20-year-old Oloroso sherry cask whiskey should taste like, and should feel like, and just what you want from it. And whenever I was tasting the Three Crowns at the start of the tasting, I was going to say something then, but I didn't say it because I'm aware that most of you haven't had Dunvilles before, so wouldn't know what I was talking about. But if you take the last three we've tried, so the PX at 12 and the Palo Cortado at 21, and now the Oloroso at 20, to me the Three Crowns is just a distilled down version of these three whiskies. So everything that's in that 20-year-old Oloroso, if you've got any of the Three Crowns left, go back to it now. The Three Crowns stands, as good as this is, the Three Crowns stands up to it. The Three Crowns is just this distilled down, and everything's just taken down. But the Three Crowns is just the very essence of the very DNA of what Dunville's is. This is the best. This and the Palo Cortado are the best for pricing tonight. Doug's right. We're trying to keep the best, the creaminess, the juiciest, the most well balanced, the most well rounded, and probably the one you're probably most familiar with, also being that Oloroso cask. It is what people are familiar with that are familiar with sherry furnished whiskies. Be that your Glendronachs, or your Macallans, your Glenfarclas's, your Glenallachries, or whatever. Or Redbreast for that matter, or it's Oloroso cask is the standard sherry cask. And it's a standard cask for a reason. It just works. It just gives you everything you want. The sweetness is there, the creaminess is there, those Christmas cake spices are there, those Christmas cake dark fruits are there. There's molasses and treacle in there, not as much as the PX, but more so than the Palo Cortado. It's the happy medium. It's the one that Goldilocks goes for every time. And we'll put this one last for all those reasons, but also it ties back so well to the first whiskey. And if you go back to it now, that Three Crowns really sings, because you can just everything that's in this is in the 3 Crowns, just on a real distilled down scale, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sorry. So James, what did the cask strength version of these? What was the cask strength? So my comment's probably a bit confusing.
No, it's my fault.
Yeah. So for the cask strength versions, there were anywhere between kind of 55 and kind of high 57s that we've done. And so for a single malt Irish whiskey, they go into cask normally at 63%, or in around 63%. So that was the thing where this one is 46% ABV, but just to kind of correct that in case anyone thinks that this one is 63%. No, my point is that at new make, they go into cask at roughly around 63%. So our cask strength versions that we've done of these of single cask releases are anywhere between 55 and 57, pretty much.
And Chris on the huge flavour, that's what we try and do. We try and get huge flavours into whiskey, but in a way that's balanced. There's no point in putting huge flavours into whiskey if they're not balanced. So you have to balance the intensity of flavour with the strength of the whiskey, with the age of the malt, with the ABV you put it out at. There's no point in putting huge flavours out at 40% because you lose the alcohol. The alcohol can't carry the flavour. There's no point in putting it out at 63% or 60% and having flavour that's lost in the alcohol and it's just spirituous. So we're trying to get a huge flavour, but as we balance there, and again, the flavour has to work and the story has to work through the nose to the palate to the finish. There has to be a connection, there has to be a story, and that story has to develop and keep you interested and develop as it goes from the nose to the palate to the finish, but also develop in the glass over the half hour that will take you to drink this pour. I want you to sit up, buy a bottle of this, do a healthy 40 ml pour, warm it in your hands, cup it in your hands, get some heat into the whiskey. That's really important with the Palo Cortados. Getting heat into the Palo Cortado is really important to bring out those leather and those tobacco notes. Oloros as well. Spend half an hour over it, enjoy how that whiskey changes in half an hour and how those huge flavors, some flavors will, after 15 minutes in the glass, will subdue down and other flavors will come to the fore, and it's a real journey. And that's what great whiskey should be, and balanced, big flavors, but big flavors that everything's kept controlled, not restrained, but controlled. And the story is evident and the story makes sense and there's balance there and there's evolution there.
Yeah.
And ultimately enjoyment. And again, going back to that mouthfeel, just how it feels in the mouth is just so underrated. It's the cherry on top of the cream on top of the cake, really,
It's a phenomenal whiskey. I almost prefer it to the Palo Cortado, and that, just to clear up on James' thing, is my fault confusion with the percentage, because I totally misread James's question as being what's the percentage of this. There is now, in terms of indication of price or to availability of the cask strength ones, maybe you could answer that. I don't do it with the kind of orderings here, and I'm told that we can't get it till January, but that we will be getting it in, because I know the guy who does order for us was keen for it to be in for this tasting, but obviously that wasn't possible. Do you have any price or availability?
Yeah, to be honest, so the problem with these bottlings is that most of you know that the kind of next 4 weeks are the last 4 weeks and the next 4 weeks are kind of probably where 30% or 40% of our overall business comes from. And with obviously supply chain issues of labels and corks and everything, the world has just completely changed. Things used to be very, very easier to get. So with this one, we're going to launch it. We'll kind of have some in Ireland, but tiny. But then it'll be kind of wider in the UK at the start of next year. The price is over 200, but it's not much over 200 for the 21 and the 20-year-old. But yeah, the cask strength versions, we haven't done a cask strength in a while. We've done some kind of exclusive single casks for some retailers. I think maybe Palace Bar. It's a kind of really good Irish whiskey pub. we done a single cask for them, but it's quite rare now. So you might find someone kind of retailers a cask strength version, but again, it's not. This is one you have to hassle a. Yeah, someone said that Oloroso cask 991. Yeah, it's very good. It's really really good. But we're gonna have to hassle the guys at the whiskey shop to maybe get a single cask in. So you have to keep on asking these guys to get one in. But yeah, the 991 is very very good, like really good.
Yeah, the
It's
991
this on
is,
steroids.
yeah.
991 was the one that came second last year. We lost by 1 point out of it was like in the Irish Whiskey Awards. So the big award we won this year, 991 was the cask that we lost out on last year by 1 point.
It was 0.1 of 1%, actually, is what we lost out on. I remember that.
You haven't forgot about it. I'm
Maybe
glad to see you're over it.
Determined to win it this year. So 991 is excellent. It's is it a 20-year-old or an 18-year-old? It's an 18-year-old.
18-year-old. It's a 19-year-old.
I'm pretty sure it's craft strength, but it's 54%.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's
54.5.
It's very similar to that last one you tried tonight, but just a wee bit more of everything. In truth, a wee bit more of everything, but very, very similar.
Yeah, there's a few comments in there on us doing a cask exclusive. I mean, I'd definitely be up for it. I suppose it's just about making sure we have the. I mean, we were discussing maybe a W Club exclusive or something, but we'll see if we have the demand for it, because I mean, I've always been evangelical about your brand and a big fan, but obviously, you know, we just need to make sure that this is, I suppose, why we're doing Nights Out Tonight, to kind of spread the word on how brilliant you are, so that we can we can do those type of collaborations.
I think Alex has shown his wealth. He has his radiator on.
Yeah, I was actually going to say, you can afford a radiator. It literally popped up.
You're freezing. Jesus.
Yeah. Well, folks, I suppose I better do the old discount code. So I will bring it up there. 1 second, just because it's WS15 DIW, I believe, but I will just confirm that and then put it in the chat. If there's, at this point tonight, we normally kind of have a favorite. Chris has jumped in there with my favorites evening, the PX and the Oloroso. So we'd love to hear what your favorites are. If there's any kind of parting comments or questions for Jarlath and Stephen. Joe said it is no surprise that you're winning awards in Ireland. For me, the 10, 21 and 20 are by far the best drams I've tasted. I presume, do you mean like ever, Joe? If you want to clarify on that, because that's a big.
I'm pretty sure that's what he meant. I'm pretty sure it just wasn't tonight. I'm pretty sure it was ever.
Yeah, no.
No, I mean, yeah, we, as you know, we probably started with the big single malts, and then started producing the blends. You know, we started back to front really. The big single malts are easy to make. You just don't compromise. You just don't compromise at any point in the process. So you make or buy the best malt you can. You buy the very best cask in the world, and you match the right whiskey to the right cask, and you leave it for as long as it takes.
Yeah.
And you don't let the accountants or anybody else get involved. You know, I mean, if it needs 6 years, if it needs 6 years in the cask, it gets 6 years in the cask. And that's not difficult. It just requires you not to compromise at any point in the process. And a wee bit of selection of cask and malt, obviously, you know, but yeah, that's what we enjoy doing. So
it's amazing though. Like I see loads of people like PX10 is really highly
coming up high,
and to be honest, for us it's great to see, because probably PX10 is probably our most famous whiskey by far. It's the one that kind of, as Luke said, it's the one that gave us the credibility way before my time, and it was one that, yeah, it's great to see. Like we were quite excited when it won the award this year. So yeah, it's brilliant that way. So yeah, I mean, we're quite excited by, and the PX10 is over the next kind of, the summer was really good. So yeah, in Echlinville, where we are in the Ards Peninsula, we're right on a peninsula, so it never gets too warm. I don't think it's probably seen snow and ever. I mean, it's a rare. It needs to be really, really bad for it to see snow, where the rest of the island would be covered in snow. The peninsula doesn't get it. So yeah, I think another really warm summer and drinking this next year could be quite special. It could be an incredible whiskey. But yeah, it's amazing that people are loving it because it's definitely one of our favorites. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And just to reiterate for anyone not looking at the chat or watching recording, WS15DIW is the right whiskey, or is the right code for that whiskey, and it counts for at the moment for any of the Dunvilles on the website. And as always, folks, in the morning when I send out the recording, you'll be getting that discount code in that there anyway. So,
well, hey guys, thank you very much. If you have any more questions, reach out to us on the Dunville's or Echlinville website. Just reach out to the info emails, and we're happy to get back to any questions. Thank you very, very much for joining us tonight. I know you had other options for the football, etc., so we do appreciate it. Luke,
no, thank you, folks, for doing
it. Always a
gents.
pleasure.
No, it genuinely is.
Give my regards to Julie.
Will do. Sorry I missed you at Whiskey Live.
I had COVID, for God's sake. Don't talk to me.
And for breaking news for anyone who's Germany are out of the World Cup as well. So
no.
Yeah.
Belgium and Germany both out.
Yeah. What a world we live in, huh? It's mad. What a time to be alive. Can't turn the radiators on in Germany out of a World Cup. Well, there you go. Lads, thanks very much, and thank you for everyone for joining us, and anyone who's watching back on the recording, and we will see you all again soon. And any questions, as Jarlath said, you can get in touch there, but also get in touch with via the email you've got the Zoom link off of. So brilliant.
Enjoy, guys. Thank you very much. Good night.